Welcome to the final episode. We have built a lot together over 7 episodes, a lint pass, a shield, a plan verifier, a whole 4C knowledge layer. Today we do not build anything new. Instead we step back and look at the shape of what we made, the patterns that kept recurring, the pitfalls worth naming one more time, and the road ahead for deterministic reasoning in agents. If the earlier episodes were the machine, this one is the manual and the horizon. Let us close the loop. Everything in this series has been one sentence, argued from 8 directions: a probabilistic proposer, plus a deterministic verifier, equals a trustworthy agent. Every episode was one word of that sentence made real. The first 3 built the foundations, the 2-brain idea, how a solver actually thinks, and the 10 Z3 constructs that are the entire working vocabulary. Then the case studies, Episode 4, explanation, linting a knowledge base to catch conflicts before any action. Episode 5, guarding, shielding physical actions in real time. Episode 6, guarding extended across time, verifying whole plans and trajectories. And Episode 7, home, all of it installed as the 4C verification layer inside the LLM Wiki. One idea, deepened 7 times. Today we name why it kept working. So what recurred? Across every deployed example, the same 4 patterns kept appearing. Knowledge base linting, compile the rules, check the store for contradictions before anyone acts, Episodes 4 and 7. Action shielding, gate each proposed action against a live safety envelope, in the loop, Episode 5. Plan verification, unroll time and judge a whole sequence at once, Episode 6. And trajectory constraints, bound properties over an entire path, never, eventually, in total, for at most, Episodes 6 and 7. 4 patterns. But watch the 4 collapse into one. Look past the surface and they are the same pattern wearing 4 different coats. A knowledge base is just a plan with no time axis. A trajectory constraint is just a shield quantified over many steps. Underneath every one of them, propose something, compile it and the rules into constraints, check, and act only on SAT. Recognize that shape once, and you have not learned 4 techniques. You have learned one, and it transfers to any regulated domain you will ever meet. Here is that one pattern, laid out as the 5 steps it always is. Step 1, propose, the neural half drafts something, a rule, an action, a plan, a policy. Step 2, compile, translate that proposal, together with the domain rules, into constraints. Step 3, check, a single call to the solver, SAT, unsat, or unknown. Step 4, explain, when the answer is unsat, the core names exactly what is wrong, in terms you can act on. And Step 5, act or repair, execute on SAT, on unsat, veto, fix, or escalate to a human. That is the whole method. And once it is this explicit, adopting it in a new domain becomes almost a fill-in-the-blank exercise. What is the proposer? What are the rules? What does a violation cost? Answer those 3, and the architecture is already written. That transferability, not any single case study, is the real product of this series. Now the pitfalls, collected in one place, because every episode ended on one and they deserve to be seen together. They sort into 3 families. First, the modeling gap, the caveat that opened episode 1 and never left. The solver checks your constraints, not the world. A rule you never encoded cannot be enforced, a clause you mistranslated is certified wrong with total confidence. Second, inputs you trust. Sensors can lie. A dependency graph can miss an edge, so staleness never propagates where it should. The declared space of cases can quietly omit the very case that bites. The gate reasons flawlessly about whatever fiction it is handed. Third, cost and calibration. Long horizons cost variables, hard problems time out to unknown, an envelope too tight burns money while one too loose misses danger. Tuning these is genuine engineering, not a constant you set once and forget. And all three trace to a single root, worth carrying out of this series above almost anything else. Verification is only ever as good as the model of the world you wrote down. So say the bounds out loud. Every time. There is one pitfall so fundamental it deserves its own slide, and it is the sharpest objection to everything we have built. If the solver's guarantees rest entirely on the constraints, and humans, or language models, write those constraints, then have we actually solved the trust problem, or just moved it? It is the right question. Here is the honest answer, in 3 parts. First, it moves to a much better place. Constraints are small, declarative, and reviewable, a handful of lines a domain expert can read over coffee. That is far easier to audit than the weights of a policy network or the tangled implications of a prose rulebook nobody has fully read. Second, it concentrates the trust. Instead of trusting every one of a million actions, you trust one compiled envelope, reviewed once and reused everywhere it applies. The attack surface shrinks to something a human can actually hold in their head. Third, it becomes checkable in its own right. Constraints get their own tests, the dead rule checks, the coverage checks, the cross-version consistency checks from episodes 6 and 7. The solver audits its own inputs. The trust problem does not vanish, nothing makes it vanish. But it shrinks, it concentrates, and it becomes inspectable. And that is the most any honest system can offer you. Now the road ahead, and the nearest turn in it. Today, in everything we built, the shield sits outside the agent, a wrapper around it. The near future puts the solver inside the reasoning loop, as just one more tool the agent calls, exactly like web search or code execution. Picture a React-style agent mid-thought. Thought, these 3 clauses might conflict, let me check before I answer. Action, it calls SMT_check on the clauses. Observation, unsat, core is C2 and C4. Thought, those 2 disagree on the Saturday rate, I will flag that rather than guess. Answer, it tells the user the clauses conflict, and cites exactly which ones. That is the shift. The agent stops guessing on questions that have provable answers. It reaches for certainty the way it already reaches for a calculator when it needs arithmetic, and when it must decline, it declines with a core, not a shrug. We spent 2 years teaching agents to retrieve. Retrieval augmented generation was step 1. Verification augmented generation is step 2. 2 directions further out. The first, learning the constraints themselves. Handwriting an envelope for every domain does not scale, and that is the honest limit of the handcrafted approach. So the frontier is to learn candidate constraints from data and expert demonstrations, and then have humans ratify them, keep the pen in human hands for what becomes law, but let the machine draft the first version. That is neuro-symbolic AI closing its own loop, the neural side proposing not just actions, but the very rules it will then be judged against. The second direction is the endpoint this whole series has been walking toward, formal vertical experts. Domain assistants that are fluent and sound at the same time. An assistant for award pay, or clinical dosing, or bushfire ratings, that converses in natural language but never once violates the code it serves. Not a chatbot bolted onto a rulebook and hoping, a verified specialist. The 4C Wiki from episode 7, given a voice. Both directions point the same way, less guessing, more guaranteeing, and, crucially, without giving up 1 ounce of the fluency that made language models worth using in the first place. Before we close, honesty has to cut both ways, so let me argue against my own tool for a moment. A symbolic gate is the right instrument only sometimes, and a good engineer knows when to leave it in the bag. Skip it when there are no hard rules to begin with. If the task is genuinely about taste, tone, or open-ended creative judgment, there is nothing to encode, and a solver adds ceremony, not safety. Skip it when consequences are cheap, when mistakes are trivially reversible and low stakes. The engineering cost of building and maintaining an envelope can simply exceed the risk it removes. And skip it when the world resists formalizing. Some domains genuinely defy clean constraints, and forcing them into logic produces brittle, false precision that is worse than honest uncertainty. So the real skill this series teaches is not using SMT everywhere. It is the judgment to recognize the hard constraint core hiding inside a messy, human problem, and to gate exactly that part, and no more. A shield around the things that must never break, and freedom everywhere else. Let me end where episode 1 began, with the two brains, because two halves of one mind is not just a teaching metaphor, I think it is the actual shape of the field right now. The right brain, fluent, creative, associative. It reads the world, drafts, imagines, converses. It is astonishing, and it is the triumph of the last decade of AI, and it cannot, on its own, guarantee anything at all. The left brain, precise, deliberate, rule-governed. It derives, it proves, it refuses. It is silent about meaning and flawless about consequence. And building it, wiring it in, trusting agents to real responsibility because of it, that is the work of the next decade. We spent 10 years teaching machines to imagine, and it worked better than almost anyone expected. The next 10 are about teaching them to be sure, and, above all, about wiring the two halves together, so that the imagination is free precisely because the consequences are guarded. If you remember only 3 things from this entire series, let them be these. 1. It is one pattern, everywhere. Propose, compile, check, explain, act, for case studies, for coats, one shape you can now carry into any regulated domain you encounter. 2. Guarantees are architectural. You cannot prompt your way to certainty. Reliability comes only from routing decisions through a layer that can genuinely prove things, and cite its reasons when it does. And 3. Honest division of labor. The language model proposes and explains, the solver verifies and refuses, and the human owns correctness and intent. Each does only what it does best, and none pretends to do another's job. And the equation, one last time, because it is the whole series in 7 words, a probabilistic proposer, plus a deterministic verifier, equals a trustworthy agent. That is the series. 8 episodes, 1 idea, and a way of building agents that I hope now feels less like magic and more like engineering. Give your agents a left brain, because the fluent, imaginative proposer, remarkable as it is, was only ever half of intelligence. The other half is the quiet, patient judge that says, not this, and here is exactly why. The decks, the code, and every narration script are open, if you would like to build on them. Thank you for spending these 8 episodes with me. Now go and give something a left brain. Goodbye.